Hello video gamers, today we're doing how to play Terran vs. Terran in 2020. Now, we've done the Terran vs. Protoss, now we're gonna do Terran vs. Terran. If you're interested about Terran vs. Protoss, how to play the matchup, it's up on my YouTube channel and you can check it out. When you finish this one, I will be also linking the replay for this game so you can copy the build in the comments below. But yeah, this will be a guide for Terran vs. Terran, how to play this matchup in 2020. So this was a little bit of a tricky one. I feel like TVP was probably the easiest to make a guide and one build for, you know, the whole matchup. TVT, there's a lot of intricacies. I'll try to get into it, and then TVZ is actually even harder, which I still need to do. So there are a couple of different builds that I want to discuss first. There is the Reaper, depot, supply depot, barracks, gas into fast expand. There's the gas barracks into fast expand. There's the double gas versions, which I personally would not suggest. I think double gas versions require a little bit higher understanding of the game, and they also rely on multitasking, aggression, which not everyone is all about. And because, you know, I'm making this guide for, you know, one specific build for this matchup, I decided to go what I think is probably the most solid one. And this is the one that I'll be showing you guys today, and this is the bio build. If there's interest in the future, by the way, to make guides for all three matchups for Terran from mech point of view, I'm more than willing to do that as well, but we'll be doing the 3 Terran versus X guides for 2020 with bio units first. So in TVT, it is very important to wall off as well. You don't want to have any weird interactions like Hellions run buying in, like reactor Hellions or something like that. If they're doing some kind of proxy, maybe like 3 Rex Marines, it's always good to have to be able to wall off quickly so the Marines and the SCVs can just run in. So this is another matchup where you just want to, wall in and be able to raise or lower supply depots if you're facing Hellions. So we will be going for supply depot, pretty standard, into barracks, and then into gas. Now, just like TVP, we will be scouting at the exact same time. So another reason why I decided to show you guys this build is it's very similar to TVP as how you open, when you scout, where you're looking to scout, and the transition. So gas finishes, we pop 2 on gas straight away, and what we're scouting in TVT, some people ask me, well, isn't this scout too late? Should I scout earlier? Should I scout later? Why am I scouting in the first place? The SCV scouting in TVT is probably even more important than TVP, I would say, because you're scouting if you're getting proxied or no with, proxy 3 Rex Reaper, proxy 2 Rex Reaper, or 4 Rex proxy Marines, or 2 Rex proxy Marauders. So you can see there's a lot of proxy variations. And if you're Terran, you're probably going to meet a lot of proxy Reapers, most likely, and then a little bit less of the other 2. Now, there's no point to scout earlier. Why? Well, because you will sacrifice your economy at a time where you don't need to. Plus, if you scout at exactly 17 supply, the moment you arrive at his base is when your barracks finishes and your SCV goes to the natural ready to build a command center. So if you get there at his base, which I'm going to speed a little bit up. So look at this. My barracks is finishing. I'm starting my Reaper. And this is the time. Usually opponents will have barracks and supply depot here. This is also an AI, by the way. Usually the opponents will have their wall off here. So this is where my barracks just finished. My SC is going to the natural. And I still have the opportunity and the chance to decide to switch and defend if I need to, if I'm meeting 3 Rex Reapers. So let's say I run in here, there's only 1 supply depot, there's no barracks whatsoever. I don't make the command center. What I do is I make, for example, on this map, I would make 1 bunker here, I would make 1 bunker here. After this Reaper, I would make a Marines, I would wall off fully with a supply depot, and then also start a factory. And then after factory, I would, get a starport and then get a command center. Because if your opponent is, I almost said Protoss, if the opponent is proxying you, they're sacrificing quite a bit of their economy and their production, because if their cheese doesn't work, they need to fly buildings from, let's say, here all the way back home. So you're all good to, just delay your command center, get the barracks factory starport first, and then get the command center later on, because you're already ahead in economy. His SCVs needed to move all the way across the map. He started mining gas super early, so you're in a good position. Most of the maps in the map pool, you can just make 2 bunkers, usually one at a jump-in point. If it has 2 jump-in points, you make one here. But always try to have 1 bunker. Let's say one can go right here, so it covers only this area. And then make the second one like on this area, so that it covers the ramp, but it also covers right here. Another cool thing you can do after you build your second depot here versus proxy, you can maybe make a factory right here. And then your bunker goes here, so that if the Reapers jump in, they have harder time, sliding through and stuff like that. But those are just little things you can do. Obviously, don't add a reactor if you're facing proxy. Just continuously produce Marines at this point. When your factory finishes, get 2-3 Hellions. After that, get a Cyclone or Siege Tank. And then you can get a, Cloak Banshee maybe, or a Medevac and do a counter push. That's up to you. Same thing goes for if you meet proxy Marauders. You would make a bunker like right here, or you can even lift off this barracks and put a bunker here. So that's, depending what you're facing, what you're scouting. But like I said, if you see double gas and no barracks, nothing in the opponent's main base, it's most likely proxy Reapers. So this is why the SCV timing is so important, because it doesn't arrive too early, too late. It arrives just at the right time, so you can scout, see what your opponent is exactly doing, and if they're cheesing, you can react accordingly. Now, if the opponent has double gas and they're going for, barracks right here and then factory, you don't need to panic. Just expand normally, and we will continue build as regularly. You just need to be a little bit more careful for the aggression, but you don't need to, cut your SCV production, build too many bunkers, or build any bunkers, or just do anything panicky. Let's say opponent is doing a normal fast expand Reapers, or Reaper fast expand. Sorry. You scout that, and you're like, okay, his SCV is moving to the natural. You can start your command center. You don't have to worry anything. Cheesy is coming. Now, the reason why I'm showing you guys this build, there's a lot of tricky things you can do in TVT, especially early game, and it's very easy for the game to snowball and for you to lose the game. For example, after this Reaper, sometimes the opponents will make another Reaper, and then they will attack you with an SCV plus 2 Reapers, which I'm sure some of you have experienced already, and then you can just lose the game straight up. Which is, again, another reason why I chose to show you this build, because it is a super safe build and it transitions really, really well. So I'm getting my Reaper, just as usual, getting my Marine, just like in TVP. Now, the one thing you'll notice, I am not sending the Reaper across the map, and you will be not sending Reaper almost ever across the map straight away. So why am I not sending it across the map? Well, first things first, you might meet the enemy Reaper right here, and then it's kind of like a 50-50 who kills who, depending on which Reaper attacked first, and those are like milliseconds. Or even worse, you can go up the ramp and his Reaper can be here, get the first shot, and then kill your Reaper. So if you saw that the opponent is expanding, you saw the command center, there's nothing else to scout, right? In TVT, 3 racks is not really a thing. So the only thing that your opponent will be going for is 1-1-1, which is barracks factory starport, or maybe 2-1-1, which is a fast stim drop, which you'll be able to see and scout without actually scouting it, which I'll get into a little bit later. So you don't want to send your Reaper across the map. If you saw two gases, barracks, and a factory thing that I was telling you about earlier, the reason why you don't want to send your Reaper across the map yet is because his 1 or 2 Reapers might arrive soon, and you want to secure your defenses before scouting if he's doing a Cloak Banshee, a Siege Tank push, or whatever else, and then you can kind of prepare accordingly. So the SCV is going back, making a bunker. You can also use the returning SCVs to make a bunker. And I'm going to get a reactor as well. Now, if this was Reaper Fast Expand versus Reaper Fast Expand, this is exactly how you do the build. If this was 2 gas and he's making stuff from his main base, I would actually go up to 3 Marines before going into reactor. Because there's a little timing where they have 2 Reapers and a Hellion, and they like try to jump in here, they put the Hellion and they try to kill your stuff here. And at that point you will only have a Reaper and a Marine, so it might get a little dicey. So I always like to go 3 Marines and then reactor if they're opening with double gas from their main base. Now behind that, again, 100 gas, we go into factory, grab the second gas, and yeah, for now you just chill. I would suggest putting this Reaper maybe here. In case the enemy Reaper jumps from here, you can catch it and kill it. Bunker's finished, so your natural is pretty much protected. If the opponent runs by your bunker, they're kind of like suiciding their units in a way because they won't really have an escape path. They can't kill your units, so people will most likely not be doing that. If they do, it's kind of like free units for you. So, natural finished, my factory finished, and from this on, from here on out, I will be doing the build as if it's Reaper Vastispan versus Reaper Vastispan, just so there's no confusion. I don't want you guys to do Tech Lab instantly if you're facing a more aggressive build. Now, around this time, when you get 2 more Marines, I would say, and when you start your Cyclone, is when you can go across the map, which you can see my 2 Marines are coming. So this is where I decide, okay, let's scout and see what the opponent is doing. You'll notice I'm not going straight through the middle. You want to go around and try to sneak in to the main base. And this is the point where if the opponent is going for 2-on-1, you can scout it. Now, if you scout right here, let's say, and there is 7-8 Marines, and they kill your Reaper, and you're like, I didn't see anything. Well, you actually did. What you saw is you only have 5 Marines right now. So 4 and 1 in the bunker. So if you see more than that at this point, that's a 2-on-1 or 3 racks Marines, which is very uncommon but possible. So TVT is a mirror, and obviously the opponent cannot have more units somehow than you, assuming they also went to Reaper. So if you see 7-8 Marines, you should know that that's multiple barracks, and you should be kind of mentally prepared for that. Now, getting the Cyclone, still making supply depots. I'm gonna get a Raven. Raven is pretty much a must-have in TVT. It's very good and it keeps you safe versus Cloak Banshees. It's gonna keep you safe versus any kind of siege tank pushes because you can just disable the tanks. You can use auto turrets. They have a lot of different ways to be used, so there's no reason not to get the Raven. Now, the Raven recently did receive a nerf where disable ability costs 75 energy instead of 50. So people don't really go for 2 Ravens as much. I personally don't like going for 2 anymore. I think 2 is still fine, but I would suggest going for 1 and then just going into Reactor Vikings after that. So you can see Marines are in the natural, chilling. Cyclone is in the main, and I'm going to put the Raven on the Cyclone in case there's a Banshee or something, so it can defend. And this build will be a 3-base build, so a macro build. Not necessarily a 3-base only build, but a macro build. You can see I'm starting my siege tank right now. I got my Cyclone, so overall, I grabbed my gas as well, the 3rd gas, which again, you can see the timing in the replay. But yeah, playing it pretty safe. I'm swapping barracks and starport. My Raven is out. So what I want to do now is produce Reactor Vikings. Why Reactor Vikings? Well, TVT is a lot about early game, and if you manage to master the early game, you will basically get a lot of free wins. People tend to be very aggressive in TVT, whether it's with Doom drops or maybe even Banshees or some kind of Siege Tank medevac or Siege Tank Viking pushes. So as long as you have that Viking production going together with your Raven and your Siege Tank, if you position your units well, you will be able to defend all those things, which is why I went and, am showing you this build specifically, because it should be impenetrable from anything you face as long as you know how to do what you're supposed to do, which, I'm hopefully teaching you right here. Getting my 3rd base. You should already get the 4th gas, by the way. I think mine was a little bit delayed in this replay. getting another tank, producing reactor Vikings. Usually I put my first tank on the natural. You can even put it closer to the CC if you want. That's what I suggest. So that if the enemy does like a drop here, if you move tank on this side, it will be able to shoot behind the mineral line. Which is why you see pro players, for example, you know, they don't put siege tanks here, they put them next to CC. Also, if you put a tank in the main, you know, same thing, you can put it here so it covers behind the mineral line. And yeah. So from here on out, my goal is to continuously produce. Yeah, my forecast is a little bit late, so get that a bit sooner. I'm still producing supply depots. Keep producing reactor Vikings. This is extremely, extremely important. I'm putting my second tank here, which is also fine to do because I have all these Vikings and Ravens and Cyclone here. So, you know, if there's any drop, I can disable one of the medevacs and just shoot down the other one. Now, the transition part. So this build is, as you can see, very passive. I'm not being aggressive at all. I'm not doing anything. And the reason why I didn't show you guys a more aggressive build is in TVT, aggression usually starts with some kind of starport unit, whether it's a medevac, Bansheer, or Liberator. If it goes well, great. The problem is if it doesn't go well, the opponent has a faster Raven, and by having a faster Raven, they're producing Vikings faster, so they're going to have the Viking count number on you. And if they have that, then you're very vulnerable to siege tank pushes because they're going to have more Vikings, and then it's kind of game over for you, especially the higher leagues you go. Now, this build might be a little too many things going on at the same time if you're a lower league, but trust me, practice it. The higher league you are, this build will pay off more and more, and it's just a very, very solid macro build. Now, I'm adding plus 2 barracks right now. My stim has been started 35 seconds ago. Basically right now I'm spending all my gas on reactor Vikings, siege tanks, started my stim, and soon I will be adding double engineering bay as well to start +1/+1 upgrades. So same thing like I did in the TVP. You stop your SCV production when you're 16 on minerals, so you can get the +2 barracks, and then you can resume your SCV production. Double engineer bay coming up. At this point, if there's nothing that, you know, tried to drop or banshees, it probably won't happen, which is why you see me have my Vikings here. If you're unsure or maybe you're not feeling comfortable with this build, it takes a while to get comfortable. I usually never scan with this build, but if, you know, obviously if this is a new build for you, you've never done it, I suggest you can drop a scan right now just to see what your opponent is doing. Maybe you're going to see the third CC, maybe you're going to see they're on 5 barracks, 1 factory, 1 starport, and 2 base, so you kind of have to play more defensive. But in general, for now, you will be defensive because you're getting your production up, getting your upgrades up, and, you know, just getting your economy up as well. So I'm floating my third. I'm going to be repositioning my tanks. So 1 tank here, which covers a little bit on this side, covers the ramp. 1 tank next to the CC. I'm going to move this tank soon as well. 1-1 will be started soonish. I'm getting more barracks. And yeah, all is good. Now, one thing I want to say and kind of mention is the lack of gas I have right now is because my 4th gas was a little too late. So, you know, that's the difference. If I got that gas 20 seconds earlier, I would have, you know, 1-1 on the way and combat shields, but there you go, optimizing builds, right? Now, the one question I get when I play TVT is, when do you stop making Vikings? Like, do you just make them forever? Do you stop at a certain number? This is true for any TVT game. Doesn't matter if it's early game, late game, mid game. The perfect number of Vikings in TVT is 1 more Viking than your opponent. Doesn't matter how many Vikings that is. If the opponent has 20 Vikings, you want to have 21. If the opponent has 5 Vikings, you want to have 6. If the opponent has 1 Viking, you want to have 2. And then you can transition to something else if the opponent stopped making Vikings. So, let's say this is a normal game, and you have no idea what the opponent is doing. I would suggest maybe scouting his, around this area or this area to try and see his Viking count. And if you see any medevacs at this point, that probably means he's already transitioned into medevacs, and you can transition as well into your medevacs. Because you don't want to end in a situation where you have 20 Vikings and he has like 4. So that's something that takes a little bit to learn, to kind of get a feel for it. And usually by this point, you will kind of know what your opponent is doing by them either being aggressive, or you did your scanning and you saw what they're doing, or, the more games you play, you will get more and more used to it and kind of figure it out on your own. It's just important to know that if you know that your opponent, or see that your opponent transition to medevacs, you should transition as well, because there's no reason to have too many Vikings. Now I'm getting my third. You can see my Marine count is a little bit low, but the Marine production is about to pop off because all these barracks are finishing, and we focused heavily on the Viking production, because there are a lot of early game pushes with like Viking Liberator that can basically end the game if you lose the Viking count. Not to mention they can have like siege thing here and then air control, so you have to scan, and they can just slowly push, and it becomes really, really awkward. I got the third, getting the double gas, still producing supply depots as you can see, trying not to get supply blocked. Marine production is finally popping off, and you can see I'm finally making some medevacs as well. If you have too many Vikings, by the way, and you win the Viking war, what you can do is you can put like 1, 2, 3 Vikings patrolling here, maybe 1, 2 Vikings patrolling here. In case there's a drop coming, it's kind of like it will shoo away the opponent, and even if it doesn't, it will give you a little bit of an earlier notice that the drop is coming. But most of the time, people, when they see that you have Vikings like right here, they're not going to continue with Doom Drop, because they're kind of fully committing, and from their point of view, it's kind of risky. Now, what else? Well, when is your first push? Because you're going for triple CC, and most of the times, especially under, I would say, Master 1 or GM, people are going to try to attack you, be very aggressive, and, just kind of try to kill you early on or harass you. You can kind of get a good feel of how well you defend to where can you push. So assuming that this game went as well as this one did, I also have a Marine here, which is something you always want to do. In case the opponent's pushing, you can relocate your units, really quickly. Let's say there's an army here, you can move your Vikings right here in position to defend. Now, let's say nothing happened. My timing for pushing is when I get my first 2 medevacs out, I try and, start being aggressive on the map. First 2 medevacs give you the healing capabilities for your Marines and kind of make you a little bit more mobile. Definitely though, before pushing, I would scan just to make sure his army is there, because what can happen is you start moving, let's say through here, and then his army arrives from this side and you lose your third base, and with that you lose the game. So try to scan, or maybe even have a Marine here. These Marines that you have, you can also push them forward. You can have 1 Marine here, 1 here, 1 here. That way, if the opponent did push out, you would see their army much sooner. And by, not seeing anything, your Marines are still there. You can be like, okay, well, there's nothing, so I can just go ahead and push across the map. Map control is extremely, extremely important in Terran versus Terran. If you ever watch the pro game, you will always see, no matter where their armies are, no matter how big their armies are, you will always see a Marine here, Marine here, Marine here, Marine here, and then the opponent's 2 Marines come and kill that 1 Marine, and then the other guy sends 3 Marines to kill those 2 Marines. And if you pay attention to pro games, this happens all the time, because you need to have, this is the matchup where you need to know where your opponent's army is, and that is single-handedly the most important thing in this matchup. Because if you don't know where your opponent's army is, for example, you're moving out here, the opponent just randomly runs in here, you lose your third, and that's probably the game, because you're going to be 3 base versus 2. So what do you do then? Your army's stuck here. If you go back, you already lost the third. Do you attack? It's too far away. He's going to win the base trade. So use those Marines. They're cheap. Spread them across the map. Even at places like these, like put 1 Marine here, because if he's going for some kind of drop, you can spot it. put one Marine here, again, one here, pretty much on every possible path. And that way try to keep the map control as much as you can. And this is something that's really easy to learn to start doing. It's not hard, it's not mechanically hard, but this is something that will have such a big impact on your games. You should start doing it today, no matter what league you are. Now, I'm still producing. I'm getting my armory. I'm soon going to start my, I like to start my 4th as I'm pushing out. And as far as production, this is too little, so I'm going to be adding another barracks and another factory as well. A good timing to know where your second factory should come is when your shields are like halfway or just started, because by the time combat shields finish, you can put this factory on the tech lab and make a reactor in this barracks as well. So you can have, you know, all barracks reactored. Now, everything that I've said is assuming that the opponent is also going bio. If the opponent is going mech, I'm not going to go too in-depth into it because the matchup is kind of completely different. But if the opponent is going mech, you can open exactly the same way, make exactly the same units, except instead of adding a second factory, I would add 2 starports right now because air control versus mech is super, super important. And another thing that I would do, I wouldn't have, you know, 5 reactors for the barracks. I would have 3 tech labs and 2 reactors so I can make some marauders as well. Versus mech. Versus bio, you only want to have marines. And if you're playing against mech, you want to start air weapons instead of siege tank weapons. Upgrade. Now, I'm moving across the map. You can see these marines is what I was talking about. Look at this. I'm sending in the marines everywhere. One there, one right here, one there, and one there. So because of this, I won't be caught, right? The opponent will not be sieged right here because I just had a marine pass there. I don't need to scan like right here or right here. This area doesn't interest me unless I want to attack it. I always advise people to attack the last opponent's base. Sometimes, you know, if the opponent has no army here, you can attack there, but always try and attack the last opponent's mining base. 4th base is going up. You can see 6 barracks and 2nd factory going up. I'm going to start my upgrades soon as well. And I'm going to tell you guys how you execute the push right now, which is very, very important, especially the first one I feel like is very impactful in TVT. So first things first, as you're attacking, obviously drop a scan. I would say after 8 minutes, stop dropping mules and save all your scans. If you look at my command centers, they're all packing more than 50 energy. You need scans so you can know when and where to position your tanks, when you can move the tanks. Maybe you lose the air control, so you need a scan to, you know, keep seeing his units. And mules are not that important at this point because you're fully saturated on your 3 bases. So what do you want to do? One mistake that I see people do is, you see these marines. That's how people sometimes siege their tanks, and that's really bad in TVT. If you siege your tanks like this, let's assume these are tanks. Only these 3 tanks, these 4 tanks will be firing. All the other ones will be AFK because they won't be in range. So what you want to do is put the tanks like I'm putting them right now. You want to put them in a line. So if the opponent engages, they're coming into not 2 tanks firing at them, but every single siege tank. And this is very, very important. You want to make a concave like this. So when opponent engages, you can see right here, that's a deadly zone. You don't want to go there. Now, if you have the Viking control, you can slow push your opponent. So what slow pushing means is you unsiege 1 or 2 tanks, you push them maybe here, and if the opponent's tanks are, you know, right there, you start shooting at them. If they scan, or even if they don't scan, you can use the interference matrix, disable the tanks, and then move in your 2 closer, siege them up, and pick up those 2 tanks, which is again something you see in pro plays quite a bit. But even if you're not necessarily pushing in, at this point the opponent is forced to constantly scan because you have the air control. Meanwhile, you can grab this army, you can load them up, you can drop them in the natural, or you can even attack here or even attack some other place. That's up to you. At this point, you slowly want to push your opponent, and most people will panic if you're this close to their third base. They will have a sloppy engage or something like that, and you can just grab a win. If that doesn't happen, remember, you can always slow push as long as you have the air control. You can also add 2 Liberators at this point, and you have the Vikings. Instead of pushing tanks forward, you can just siege up Liberators and slowly but surely zone your opponents out. And this is something you will see at the highest of levels. TvT plays very weirdly in a way where you start with a lot of Vikings and tanks, and then you transition to mass tank, marine, medevac, but it actually ends again with Vikings and Liberators in the end. So you will see as I'm maxing out, I slowly add more starports, and the reason for that is for the same reason I just said. You will get into a lot of these situations. Maybe you won't be in front of his base. Maybe his army will be here, yours will be here. And you can siege up a Liberator and slowly push out your opponent, force him to unsiege, move back, and thus you gain more and more space. So eventually you will want to switch back to Vikings, maybe not at this point, depending how your game goes. You will want to switch back to the air control, and again, try to have one more Viking than your opponent. Get the Liberators, and they will basically be your siege tanks, but they will be buying space for your tanks. And opponent can't really do anything. If you have tanks sieged up like this, and you siege up Liberator from here to there, zoning out the tanks a little bit, if the Marines try to go in, or Cyclones, they will die. And if he doesn't have enough Vikings, he can't do anything about it, so it's kind of like checkmate kind of situation. I'm adding some missile turrets. If you're feeling more comfortable, you can add your sensor towers a bit earlier. I'm only adding them now. That's up to you. Swapping my factory, and yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much TvT in a nutshell. Again, there's a lot of intricacies because Vikings, tanks, Liberators are very specific units. You need to use them in specific ways, so it's kind of hard to show you in a guide every single thing, but I hope that the explanations and the stuff that I was talking about help you a little bit. So right here, I try to do something to show you if let me go back a little bit. So if his tanks are like this, imagine this range is up to here. So there's no way for you to push in. So what you can do is use the Raven, disable these 2 tanks, and you can move in your tanks, siege up, and then blast them away. That's one of the examples you can try and break your siege lines, or enemy siege lines. But other than that, TvT can be very, very hectic, but keeping the map control, making sure, again, make sure you know where your opponent's army is at all times. If you know where your opponent's army is at all times, you will feel so much safer and so much comfortable in this matchup to be able to push out, play around the map, and just not be worried, where your opponent is, what are they gonna do, oh my god, what if I get doom dropped, and stuff like that. If you're constantly wondering, oh my god, what if they doom drop me right now, or something like that, then you either don't have good Viking positioning, or maybe you just don't really know what your opponent's army unit comp is, because if for whatever reason they randomly leave their base to doom drop you, and you're powering up and you have Vikings here, that's pretty much game over for them. And as you're moving out, if you have Marines in position and then you scan and you see no Vikings and no medevacs and not a lot of units, well, then there's probably an army on the map somewhere dropping. Or if you see all the medevacs there, let's say you scan and you see 46 medevacs, well, there's all the medevacs, so they're not dropping you. And that's something you can take away from TvT quite a bit. Try to see what your opponent has in their army and kind of look from that what they are able to build. If they have, let's say, 14 Vikings and 2 Ravens, there's obviously no medevacs because they've been constantly producing Vikings. Same thing goes the other way. If they have 10 medevacs and, a big army, then they don't have air control. So you can be like, okay, they don't have air control. I have 6 Vikings, 8 Vikings, doesn't matter. Let me make 2 Liberators. And if we get into a clash where his army is sieged up, my army is sieged up, you have the air control, so you can just use those 2 liberators to slowly push out the enemy. I usually try and like getting +1 weapons or +2 weapons for siege tank before going into air weapons. But if the game gets to this point where you're making extra starports, and you're producing reactor medevacs, reactor liberators, reactor Viking, reactor liberators, and you get liberator range, I would even suggest add another armory and get ship weapons and armor plating at the same time. But that's pretty much it. Try to continuously expand. After your 3rd base, always get a planetary, never get an orbital after your 3rd base. Build sensor towers, try to have as much map control as possible, and that's it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask in the comments below. Like always, I will try and answer as many as I can. Again, this matchup is different when you play against mech. The only advice I can give you versus mech is you need to have air control, and you need to win with liberators plus air control. That is the goal, but you can open exactly the same way and do everything up until this point exactly same way, just with more Marauders, more Vikings, and more Liberators. If you guys are interested in mech guides versus alternate races, once I finish the TVZ with Bio as well, please let me know in the comments below. For now, that's it. Again, replay will be in the description of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Have a good one, and I'll see you tomorrow with another video. Bye-bye.